In 1994, Marvel released Marvels, a prestige comic showing the Marvel Universe through the eyes of an ordinary photographer. It was beautiful, hopeful. It reminded readers why they loved superheroes. 1 year later, Warren Ellis asked a simple question. What if none of it worked? What if the radiation that gave the Fantastic Four their powers just gave them cancer? What if the super soldier serum turned Steve Rogers into a tumor-covered mess? What if Peter Parker's spider bite was just a spider bite from a radioactive spider and it killed him slowly and painfully, like radiation poisoning actually would? The result was Ruins, a 2-issue prestige format comic from 1995 that Marvel has quietly pretended doesn't exist for almost 30 years. They've never reprinted it, they don't talk about it, and honestly, I kind of understand why. This isn't edgy for the sake of edgy. This is Warren Ellis systematically dismantling the scientific absurdity of superhero origins by showing what would realistically happen. And the answer is, everyone dies, horribly, alone, and without hope. Let me walk you through the most disturbing Marvel comic ever published. Our story follows Phil Sheldon, the same photographer from Marvel's. But this isn't the same Phil Sheldon. In this universe, Phil is dying. He's got some kind of respiratory illness, he's coughing up blood, and he's traveling across America trying to document what went wrong with the world. Because in this universe, everything went wrong. Phil's first stop is the ruins of the Avengers, and I need you to understand how bleak this is. The Avengers' Quinjet crashed years ago. When Phil arrives at the wreckage, he finds what's left of the team. Giant Man's skeleton is still there, fused to the twisted metal. The Scarlet Witch's corpse is tangled in the wreckage, and Captain America, Steve Rogers, is still alive. Barely. The super soldier serum didn't make him a perfect human. It made him a mass of tumors. He's been lying in this wreckage for years, unable to die. His body, a grotesque monument to failed science. Phil takes his photos and moves on. It doesn't get better. He visits a government facility where the X-Men are being held, not as threats, but as victims. In this world, the X gene isn't a gift, it's a disease. Mutations aren't powers, they're deformities. The X-Men are dying in government quarantine, their bodies falling apart from genetic instability. And here's the detail that stuck with me. They're not angry. They're not fighting back. They're just waiting to die. Scott Summers isn't Cyclops. He's a blind man whose eyes rotted out of his skull. These aren't heroes. They're patients in a hospice. Phil keeps traveling. He finds the Hulk, or what's left of him. Bruce Banner's gamma bomb exposure didn't give him the ability to transform. It gave him tumors, massive, grotesque tumors that consumed his body until he died in agony. When Phil finds the site, there's just a grave marker and a photograph of what Banner looked like at the end. Ellis doesn't show us much, but what he describes is enough. Then we get the Fantastic Four, and this is where the comic goes from bleak to nightmarish. Reed Richards' rocket launch happened. The cosmic rays hit them. But instead of gaining powers, their bodies started to change uncontrollably. Susan Storm didn't become invisible. Parts of her body started phasing out of existence randomly. She was essentially being erased piece by piece. Johnny Storm didn't gain the ability to control fire. He just ignited and couldn't stop. He burned to death, screaming while his family watched. Ben Grimm's transformation into rock wasn't a stable mutation. It was his body calcifying, turning toit from the outside in, while he was still conscious. He suffocated as his own chest cavity hardened. Reed Richards survived the longest, but his stretching powers weren't powers at all. His molecular structure became unstable. He essentially became a human puddle, his body losing cohesion until he was just organic matter spread across the floor. And Phil documents all of it. Every death, every failure, every moment where the Marvel Universe's impossible science met actual reality and lost. Then we get to Spider-Man. And this one hits hardest because Ellis takes his time with it. Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider. In our Marvel universe, that gave him proportional spider strength, wall crawling, and spider sense. In the Ruins universe, it gave him radiation poisoning. When Phil finds Peter, he's in a rundown apartment, alone and dying. No Aunt May, no Mary Jane, just a kid who got bitten by something he shouldn't have touched. Now he's watching his own body shut down and his life slip away. Peter knows he's dying. He's known for a while, and he tells Phil his story. Not a superhero origin, just a tragedy. A teenager who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, who never got powers, who never saved anyone, who's just going to die forgotten in a dirty apartment. Phil takes his picture and leaves, and Peter dies alone. The comic ends with Phil himself. He's been dying throughout the entire story, coughing up blood and getting weaker. He finally collapses on a roadside somewhere in America. His final photographs are developed. His final story is told, and the message is clear. In a world without miracles, without the impossible science that makes superheroes work, there are no heroes, there's just suffering. The painted art by Cliff and Therese Nielsen makes all of this worse. This isn't comic book art. These are paintings, realistic, detailed, unflinching paintings of bodies in death and decay. When you see Steve Rogers covered in tumors, it doesn't look like a comic panel, it looks like a medical photograph. Warren Ellis wrote this comic at the height of the grim and gritty era, and in some ways, it's a critique of that era. It's asking, you want dark? You want realistic? Here's what realistic actually looks like. It's not cool anti-heroes with guns. It's young people dying of cancer because radiation doesn't give you superpowers. But it's also something else. By showing us a world where nothing works, where every hero fails, where there's no hope, it actually makes you appreciate the main Marvel universe more. The absurdity of comic book science isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the thing that allows hope to exist. Marvel showed us the Marvel universe as a place of wonder. Ruins showed us what that universe would be without the wonder. And the answer is just ruins. Ruins isn't a comic Marvel wants you to read. They've never collected it in a trade paperback. They've never reprinted it. It exists as these 2 prestige format issues from 1995. That's probably where it'll stay. But I think it's worth talking about. Not because it's fun. It absolutely is not fun. But because it forces you to confront something most superhero stories avoid. The genre only works because we agree to ignore reality. Kind of like our economy. Warren Ellis looked at the Marvel Universe, applied actual physics and biology, and showed us the horror that results. And in doing so, he accidentally made one of the best arguments for why superhero stories matter. We need the impossible. We need the miracles. We need to believe that radiation can give you powers instead of cancer. Because the alternative is ruins, and nobody wants to live there.